Once the Vault Hunters made their way inside the encampment, they realized it was much smaller than it had appeared from the outside. It was a humble haven, built to provide weary travelers a place to rest and replenish supplies before continuing their journeys through the perilous wonderlands of Pandora. The atmosphere was tense but relieved after the recent goblin attack, and the trio was soon greeted by 4 individuals who had taken shelter before the chaos had erupted. A strikingly beautiful woman among them waved the Vault Hunters over. Suidas, Mr. Phantom, and Cliff approached cautiously, sizing up the group. Beside the woman stood a towering knight clad in heavy armor. He leaned forward, studying Suidas with interest. "Well, what do we have here?" the knight said, his voice deep and booming. "It's not every day you see a band of Vault Hunters storm through, especially a siren." He stepped closer to Suidas, his eyes lingering on the glowing markings etched along her arm. "Did you know there are only 7 of you that can exist at once?" 7? Isn't that something? "I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself properly. The name's Hector." He gestured to the others standing behind him. "This little lady next to me is Lily. That young lad in the blue is Samuel, and the big fella there is Vaux. He's a traveling salesman if you're in need of supplies. But you lot look a little lost. Is this your first time in the Wonderlands?" Suidas, still recovering from the battle, explained that they were indeed passing through, but none of them really knew where they were headed. Hector raised an eyebrow and grinned. "Well, that explains a lot. There's a small town a few hours north called Shadow Grove. The people there aren't too bad as long as you don't stir up trouble. From what I've heard, there's plenty of work for Vault Hunters like yourselves, especially if you're looking to stock up on gold. The leader of the town's been having some problems, and the sight of you might just cheer him up. Sounds like the perfect job for Vault Hunters." He pointed toward the northern gate of the encampment. "But be warned, what's a few hours' travel might feel like a lifetime. The woods are crawling with more than just goblins and psychos. We've been setting up these checkpoint settlements because of the creatures that infest these parts. Thanks again for handling that goblin swarm. We owe you one." With that, Hector gave a respectful nod and headed toward the encampment's lounge area. Lily, the woman who had waved them over, stepped forward to speak to the Vault Hunters. "Thank you for your help. These encampments have been having a lot more trouble lately with bandits and goblins on the rise. They're meant to be safe havens for travelers like you, but some are safer than others." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "If you do decide to head north to Shadow Grove, could you pass along a little message for me?" Mr. Phantom, ever the enigma, responded with a simple "sure," though he was unsure whether they'd actually get around to doing it. Lily gave a small, grateful smile. "Just tell the bartender at the tavern that Lily will pay her tab when she gets back. He'll know what it means. I can't give you too much detail, but let's just say we could really use some Vault Hunters right now. The Wonderlands, well, they're not what they seem. There are dark forces out there, powerful ones, trying to take control. Shadow Grove is just the beginning. Your journey will be long, and it won't be easy. Stay safe out there." The Vault Hunters took her words to heart as they checked out Vaux's inventory. Stocking up on ammunition and other supplies, they prepared for whatever lay ahead. Once ready, they made their way to the northern gate, casting one last look at the encampment before turning their attention to the ominous path leading towards Shadow Grove. As they stepped through the gate and into the unknown, they knew that whatever awaited them in the shadowy town was only the start of something much larger. Pandora was full of secrets, and they were just beginning to uncover the darkest ones. With the path ahead uncertain but filled with possibility, the Vault Hunters ventured forward, ready for whatever the Wonderlands had in store. As the Vault Hunters made their way deeper into the northern woods, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to press in from all sides. They were surrounded by dark, gnarled tree trunks that twisted up toward the sky, their branches hanging low over the narrow, winding path. Overhanging limbs crossed overhead like skeletal arms, while thick clumps of bushes and barely visible black trails snaked through the undergrowth, making the forest seem alive with lurking dangers. The faint glow of moonlight barely pierced the dense lattice of leaves above, casting fleeting patches of silver on the path. Now and then they caught glimpses of the sky, a patchy canvas of stars, as the tall, shadowed pines stretched upward like arrows aimed at the heavens. The wind whispered through the trees, slipping between the branches, carrying with it the sounds of the creaking trunks and the occasional flutter of unseen wings. Every step the Vault Hunters took echoed with the crackling of undergrowth beneath their boots. The scent of rotting leaves and earthy fungus filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of pine needles and the unmistakable musk of what could have been a skunk's spray. It was as if the very essence of the forest was decaying around them, turning what might have once been a place of beauty into a dark and dreary maze. Dewy wet leaves brushed against them as they pushed forward, and more than once they tripped over roots and bumpy stones hidden beneath the thick foliage. Cobwebs seemed to cling to their faces at every turn, thin strands of sticky silk barely visible until they walked through them. Each time, Swedas, Mr. Phantom and Cliff instinctively brushed them away, the sensation unsettling in the cold, damp air. Cliff, however, was the first to truly react when he felt the tiny legs of a spider scurrying across his face after pushing through another web. He stopped dead in his tracks, swatting at his face in panic. "Oh, hell no, guys," he muttered, shaking his head as if trying to dislodge the memory of the spider. "I need a damn drink." Swedas, still focused but starting to feel the weight of the forest's eerie energy, gave a sympathetic nod. "The sooner we get to Shadow Grove, the sooner you can find that drink," she said, though even she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. Mr. Phantom remained quiet as always, his mask hiding any expression, though his movements were deliberate and measured. His eyes scanned the undergrowth, ever alert to the sounds and sights of the dark forest. The subtle creaks of the trees and the flutters of unseen creatures set him on edge. But outwardly, he remained as calm and enigmatic as ever. The path ahead grew even more difficult as they ventured further, the trees becoming denser, their branches now stretching out like claws. The occasional trip on a hidden root or stone caused frustration to simmer, but none of them dared slow down. Whatever had turned this once beautiful forest into a place of dread was growing stronger. Its presence felt in every creaking branch and every gust of wind that seemed to whisper their names. The journey to Shadow Grove was proving to be far more treacherous than any of them had anticipated. Each step felt like it was pulling them deeper into a world where danger was just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But as Vault Hunters, they knew this was only the beginning. The forest was testing them, and they would not fail. They pressed on, eyes forward, weapons ready, knowing that whatever awaited them in the town of Shadow Grove would pale in comparison to the darkness growing within these cursed woods. The Vault Hunters pushed forward through the ever-darkening forest, the oppressive air thick with tension. Every crack of a branch, every gust of wind felt heavier, more foreboding than before. The decaying beauty of the once majestic forest seemed to shift around them, as if alive and aware of their presence. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a grim scene. A corpse lay crumpled at the base of a tree, its eyes and mouth filled with dirt, as if the forest itself had claimed the soul that once inhabited the body. The figure still clutched an axle, which was deeply embedded into the nearest tree, as though they had died in the midst of a desperate struggle. The sight was unnerving, a stark reminder that Pandora was filled with horrors beyond the goblins and bandits they had already encountered. Cliff knelt beside the body, his usual bravado fading. "This doesn't look like a peaceful way to go," he muttered, shaking his head. Suidas stood still, scanning the surrounding woods with her siren senses heightened, but even she could feel something was very wrong here. They ventured further and found themselves at the edge of a massive clearing. In the center of the circle of felled trees stood a wild-eyed orc, his gaunt, malnourished body wrapped in tattered rags, gripping a massive great axe. His skin was pale and his eyes burned with the light of madness, bloodshot and filled with unhinged fury. The air around him felt thick, unnatural. The orc made eye contact with the Vault Hunters, locking onto them with an intensity that sent a shiver down their spines. In that moment, a deep fog rolled in, faster and thicker than anything that could have come naturally. It swept across the clearing, drowning the trees and ground in a dense, impenetrable mist. The orc let out a tremendous, blood-curdling scream, one that echoed through the forest and seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. As the scream faded, the Vault Hunters realized the trap had been sprung. From the fog and shadows of the surrounding woods, orcs emerged, their brutish forms barely visible at first, but their ferocious growls and stomping feet quickly revealed their numbers. The hunters were surrounded, the once empty circle of felled trees now filled with savage warriors charging toward them with murderous intent. Weapons drawn, they came at the Vault Hunters from every direction, their attacks swift and unrelenting. Suidas immediately phased into action, vanishing into the ethereal realm and reappearing behind an attacking orc, striking him down with deadly precision. Mr. Phantom, with the rifle still in his hands, called forth his death trap, the hulking mech tearing into the orcs with relentless force. From above, Cliff's wyvern swooped down, breathing fire and clawing at the horde as Cliff fired rounds into the approaching enemies, desperately trying to keep them at bay. "These guys are relentless," Cliff shouted, rolling to dodge a massive swing from one of the orcs. "Any ideas?" Suidas dodged another attack and shouted back, "Stay mobile, don't let them corner us. We have to keep moving." The fog made it hard to see, and the sounds of battle echoed in disorienting ways, making it difficult to tell how many orcs were surrounding them. The Vault Hunters fought back fiercely, but the orcs were strong and ruthless, each one swinging their crude weapons with unbridled rage. Mr. Phantom, ever the strategist, kept moving along the edge of the battle, picking off orcs with precision shots while his death trap wreaked havoc in the thick of the fighting. He could sense that the orcs weren't just attacking out of bloodlust. They were defending something, perhaps something tied to the unnatural fog and the corpse they had found earlier. As the battle raged on, the great axe-wielding orc at the center of the clearing watched with wild eyes, his madness intensifying. The fog swirled around him, thicker now, and it seemed to pulse with each of his screams. This wasn't just a random ambush, it was part of something far darker. Something deeply rooted in the magic of the Wonderlands. The Vault Hunters knew that to survive, they needed to end this quickly, but the orcs were relentless, and the fog was closing in tighter. Suidas swiftly switched to her tall shotgun, unleashing devastating blasts that sent orcs flying back in explosions of shrapnel and fire. The force of each shot echoed through the fog, her movements precise as she mowed down the advancing enemies. "That's how it's done," she boasted as she blasted away a final orc that got too close. Cliff, his revolver gleaming under the faint light, took steady aim at the remaining orcs. With a sharp crack, he fired, each shot finding its mark. One by one, the orcs fell, their savage roars cut short by the hunter's deadly accuracy. "Stay down!" Cliff muttered as he dropped the last of his targets, though his mind was still distracted by the hope of finding some hidden stash of ale amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, Mr. Phantom, his sights trained on the pale, axe-wielding orc at the center of the clearing, unloaded round after round from his dull assault rifle. The bullets tore into the orc's flesh, and with a final scream of fury, the beast fell to the ground, his axe slipping from his grasp as the unnatural fog began to thin. The battlefield grew quiet, save for the heavy breathing of the Vault Hunters. Then, as if on cue, loot began to rain down, shimmering in the dim moonlight, clinking against the ground like the reward for yet another hard-fought victory. Weapons, gear, and gold littered the ground, calling to the hunters with the promise of upgrades and riches. Cliff was the first to dive in, his eyes lighting up as he rummaged through the spoils. Among the treasure, his hand landed on a pristine-looking Jacob's revolver. He admired its craftsmanship, testing its weight and feel. "Now this," he said with a grin, "is what I'm talking about. But I swear one of these orcs better have stashed some ale somewhere." Mr. Phantom, ever meticulous, carefully sorted through the loot. After a moment, he pulled out a sleek Jacob's shotgun, its polished barrel gleaming in his hand. He tilted his mask slightly as if smiling beneath it. "This will do nicely," he murmured, appreciating the raw stopping power the shotgun promised. Suidas, still on high alert, found herself a new weapon as well, an upgraded Maliwan SMG, its elemental powers humming softly in her grip. She inspected it with satisfaction, already feeling the potential of its enhanced firepower. "Looks like we're gearing up for something big," she said, her gaze shifting from the loot to the darkened horizon beyond the battlefield. With their new weapons in hand and the spoils of victory claimed, the Vault Hunters regrouped, feeling a renewed sense of strength. The battle had been fierce, but they had once again proven their resilience. However, the forest still loomed dark and mysterious, and the town of Shadow Grove awaited them. They had only just begun to uncover the dangers lurking within the Wonderlands, but with each success they were one step closer to the truth, and whatever riches or perils lay ahead. Cliff looked at the others, tucking his new revolver into its holster. "All right, let's get moving. Shadow Grove ain't gonna wait, and neither is that drink."